The dog didn't growl at her. That was the first thing everyone noticed. He'd been growling at everyone else since the moment Staff Sergeant Weston Hale walked through the front door of Clover Ridge Animal Hospital. The leash wrapped twice around his fist like he was trying to keep a grenade from going off. The German Shepherd, big, mud-streaked, moving with the stiff-legged wariness of an animal that had seen too many things it couldn't unsee, had already made one vet tech back against the wall and caused another to quietly relocate to the break room. The receptionist had stopped trying to hand Weston the intake clipboard. She just slid it across the counter and stepped back. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, overcast, the kind of cold that crept under your jacket collar. The waiting room had 3 other people in it, an elderly man with a tabby cat in a carrier, a teenage girl holding a rabbit wrapped in a dish towel, and a woman in her 60s who kept her golden retriever pressed against her knee and her eyes fixed on the far wall. Weston didn't acknowledge any of them. He stood in the center of the room with the dog, his dog, whose name was Rex, though he'd never said it aloud in here yet, and the two of them radiated the same energy, tightly coiled, ready, deeply uninterested in being told what to do. Nurse practitioner Sable Greer had been walking from the back office to the supply closet when she heard the low sound from the waiting room. Not a bark, not a snarl, just that sustained, chest-deep warning that meant the animal was somewhere between scared and certain. She stopped in the hallway, tilted her head, and listened. She'd worked veterinary medicine for 6 years, first in a shelter outside Nashville, then here in Clover Ridge, Virginia, and she'd learned early that the sound an animal made was almost never about the animal. It was about everything around the animal. The room temperature, the smell of antiseptic, the tension in the person holding the leash. She set her clipboard on the counter and walked to the waiting room door. Weston Hale was not a man who went unnoticed in a room. He was 6'2", broad through the shoulders, wearing a gray Army-issue hoodie with the sleeves cut off and cargo pants tucked into boots that had seen actual mud, not the decorative kind. His jaw was set in a way that suggested it was always set like that. He was maybe 34, 35, with dark circles under his eyes that had nothing to do with last night's sleep and everything to do with the last several years. Rex stood at his left side. The dog's ribs showed slightly through the fur. His right rear leg had a notable hitch in it when he shifted his weight. Sable took all of this in from the doorway in about 4 seconds. She didn't look at Weston first. She looked at Rex. She looked at the way the dog's ears were pinned half back, not fully flat, which would mean fear, but half back, which meant uncertainty. She looked at the way his eyes kept moving to the side door, mapping exits. She looked at the way his weight was distributed, favoring the rear left, protecting that hitching right leg. Then she looked at Weston. How long has he been favoring the back right? Weston's eyes flicked to her. He hadn't expected the question to start there. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Did it come on gradually, or was there an incident? Gradual. She nodded, still not approaching, just standing in the doorway with her arms loose at her sides. What's his name? A pause. Short, but there. Rex. She said it the same way Weston did. Not high-pitched, not the way people talk to dogs like they were babies. Just his name, said like it meant something. Is he usually like this in new environments, or is today specifically hard? Weston's jaw tightened. He doesn't like strangers. He's telling me that, Sable said. I'm asking about you. The waiting room went very quiet. The elderly man with the tabby cat became extremely interested in the floor. Weston stared at Sable for a long moment with an expression that was half irritation and half something else he probably would have denied. We've had a rough couple of weeks, he said finally. It came out like he'd had to drag it from somewhere deep. She nodded like that was enough information. It was, for now. I'm going to come closer, she said. I'm going to stay low. If he tells me to stop, I'll stop. I won't touch him until he asks me to. Weston actually made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, more like exhale with a smirk attached. He doesn't ask people for anything. Sable looked at Rex again. Rex was looking at her. She moved into the room slowly, the way water moves when it's not in a hurry. She kept her profile small, her gaze soft, her hands visible. She got to about 6 feet from Rex and crouched down, not looking at him directly, just present, just there, like a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. She waited. Rex's ears moved, still half back but different, questioning. Weston watched with his arms crossed. 30 seconds passed. Sable didn't move. She wasn't performing patience. She actually had it. This was a thing she'd learned in the shelter, in those first months when she'd had to earn the trust of dogs who'd stopped expecting anything good from people. You couldn't fake your way through it. Animals knew when you were faking. Rex stretched his neck forward and sniffed in her direction, once, twice. His ears came up slightly. He took one step toward her. "Don't," Weston started. Rex took another step. Weston stopped. Rex put his nose against Sable's shoulder and inhaled deeply. "She's still," he exhaled. He inhaled again. Then, with the slow inevitability of something that had been decided somewhere outside of anyone's conscious control, he pressed his whole head against her chest, and his tail, which had not moved since he walked in, moved once, twice. The teenage girl with the rabbit made a small sound. Sable brought one hand up slowly and rested it on the side of Rex's neck, not gripping, just there. She felt the tension in him like a cord pulled too tight, and she just let her hand rest until some of that tension moved out of him and into the floor. She looked up at Weston. He was looking at his dog. His face had done something she couldn't fully name. Opened, maybe. Gone a little young. He looked for a second, like someone who had forgotten that things could surprise him. Then his expression closed back up. "I need to examine him," Sable said. "Can you bring him to room 2? Weston nodded. He didn't say anything else, but he followed her. Room 2 had a steel examination table and fluorescent lighting and the permanent faint smell of antiseptic and animal. Sable had always thought rooms like this were where trust either got built or destroyed, and that the building or destroying happened in the first 30 seconds before any medical equipment came out. Rex was on the floor. He was not going to the table. Sable didn't fight this. She crouched beside him and began working through her initial assessment from where she was. Eyes, ears, gum color, lymph nodes along the jaw, coat condition. She talked while she worked, not to Weston, not to the dog exactly, just out loud into the room, naming what she was seeing, like a cartographer calling out the shape of a territory. Gums are a little pale, not alarming, but worth noting. Eyes are good, ears are clean. Someone's been keeping up with that. Coat's a little dull around the hindquarters. She paused with her hand on his flank. Has he been eating? Less than usual? Drinking? Yeah, sleep pattern? Weston hesitated. He moves around a lot at night. She nodded without looking up. Like he can't get comfortable, or like he's checking the exits. Another pause. Both. She sat back on her heels and looked at Rex, who was watching her with a calm he hadn't had in the waiting room. I'd like to take some x-rays of that rear leg, run a basic panel. The leg could be early arthritis, could be an old injury that's calcifying wrong, could be a few other things. The blood work will tell us more. Fine. I'll also want to talk to you about his stress levels, because some of what I'm seeing isn't purely physical. Weston's chin came up slightly. He's not stressed. He's a trained working animal. Sable looked at him then, directly. Trained working animals get PTSD, Sergeant. It's documented. It's not a weakness and it's not an opinion. The title had come out automatically. She'd clocked the posture, the haircut, the dog's behavior, the way Weston occupied all of it added up. But she hadn't been certain until she watched his face register the word sergeant with a precision that only happened when it was accurate. Something shifted in his expression again. Not softness, exactly. More like the slight give of something under pressure. Staff Sergeant, he said. Sorry, Staff Sergeant. He looked at Rex. Rex was leaning against Sable's leg. Weston looked at this like it was a puzzle he was still working out. How did you do that? He said. Do what? He stopped. Tried again. He's been like this since we got back. Not just with strangers. With me, too. He barely sleeps in the same room anymore. He said it like he was confessing something embarrassing. I figured it was the leg. It might be partly the leg, Sable said. Chronic pain changes behavior, but I think there's more going on. She waited. She was good at waiting. Weston sat down on the low bench along the wall, which was the first time he'd been at a level where he wasn't looking down at everything in the room. He put his forearms on his knees. Rex looked at him and then looked at Sable, and then lay down with his chin on her shoe. Weston watched this for a moment. We were overseas, he said. Kandahar, mostly, then a few other places I can't say. Rex was my working partner for 3 years. He paused. There was an incident. An IED, not targeting us directly, but close enough. Rex got thrown, I got thrown. We both walked away, but he stopped. We both walked away. When did you get back? 11 weeks ago. Sable nodded. And how long had you been over there? This last tour was 14 months. Before that, he shook his head. It adds up, it does, she said. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Rex breathed slowly. The fluorescent light hummed. Does he have access to a decompression routine? Sable asked. Consistent schedule, low stimulation environment, structured exercise that's appropriate for the leg? We live in an apartment. That can work. It's not ideal, but it can work. Does he have a crate he chose himself? He doesn't use a crate. I don't make him. That's fine if it's his choice. Is he getting outside time twice a day, consistent hours? Weston was quiet. Then, not always. Okay. She kept her voice level, no judgment in it. Here's what I think is happening. You're both managing a hard transition, and you're both trying to do it alone, and neither of you is sleeping well, and the leg is hurting him, and he can feel whatever you're carrying even when you don't say it out loud. Because that's what these dogs do. They tune into you. That's the whole point of them. Weston looked at Rex. He's not pulling away because he's done with you, Sable said quietly. He's overwhelmed, same as you. For a moment the room was very still. Then Weston said, in a voice that was carefully controlled but just barely, he's the only reason I got through some of it. I know, Sable said, and I think he knows you're the reason he got through it too. That's a lot of weight for two people to carry between them. She hadn't meant to say it. It had just come out, shaped by 6 years of watching animals and the people who loved them try to navigate the same impossible grief of having survived something together and not knowing how to be okay. Weston didn't respond. He was looking at the floor. His jaw was working like he was chewing through something. Rex got up slowly from Sable's shoe. He walked over to Weston and put his head in Weston's lap. Weston's hand came down on the dog's head without thinking. The way breathing happened without thinking, and he sat there with his eyes closed for a moment that nobody in the room commented on. The x-rays showed moderate hip dysplasia in the right rear leg, worse on one side, and 2 small calcified areas that were consistent with an old impact injury that had never been properly addressed. There was no fracture, nothing surgical. What Rex needed was pain management, physical therapy, controlled exercise, and Sable wrote this in the chart with the same clinical weight as everything else, a behavioral consultation with someone who worked specifically with military working dogs. She knew someone. She made a call from the hallway while Rex's blood was being processed. The consult was with a man named Dr. Terrence Aldo, who ran a program 30 minutes up the road in Fredericksburg, specifically for service animals transitioning out of active deployment. Sable had referred 2 other dogs to him in the last year. Both owners had cried in her office, in the good way. She came back to room 2 with a printed sheet of Aldo's information, the x-ray results, and a prescription for a low-dose anti-inflammatory that would take the edge off the hip pain without sedating Rex. Weston read through the x-ray notes slowly. He wasn't the kind of man who nodded along to show he was listening. He actually read every line. The physical therapy, he said. I can do the exercises at home? Most of them, yes. I'll show you today before you leave. And this, he tapped Aldo's information sheet. This is for the behavior stuff. It's for both of you, technically. Aldo's program works with the dog and the handler together. He says you can't fix one without the other, and in my experience, he's right. Weston looked up from the sheet. I think you've been doing this alone for 11 weeks, Sable said. And I think Rex has been doing it alone for 11 weeks too, because you've been trying to protect each other instead of just being tired together. That's a hard habit to break. Aldo's good. He doesn't talk to veterans like they're fragile. Something relaxed in Weston's face, a specific tension that had been there since he walked in. How do you know that? Because I asked him specifically before I started referring people to him. I told him if he talks down to my veterans, I'll stop sending him dogs and he'll have to find a new reason to exist. She said it completely straight. Weston stared at her for a second, then he laughed. Actual, real laughter, brief and surprised, like something that had escaped before he could stop it. Rex's ears lifted at the sound. I haven't heard him laugh in a while, Weston said, looking at the dog. His voice had gone rough at the edges. He'll come back, Sable said. It takes time. It's not gone. She walked them through the physical therapy exercises in the small yard behind the clinic. Rex moved through them better than she expected, engaged, present, eyes on Sable and then on Weston, tracking both of them like he was recalibrating something. Weston was a quick study. He asked good questions. He watched her hands when she demonstrated and then mirrored the motion exactly the way someone did when they'd been trained to pay attention to physical instruction. Left hand under the stifle, right hand supports the hock. Yeah, just like that, Sable said. And hold, count 3, then lower. Rex let him do it. He turned his head back and looked at Weston while Weston was holding his leg, and something passed between them. Some recognition, some small acknowledgement of each other. Sable watched this and felt something settle in her chest that she couldn't fully name. This was why she did this work. Not the medicine, or not only the medicine. This particular thing that happened when the space between a person and an animal softened just enough for both of them to exhale. He trusts you, she said. I know it doesn't feel like he does right now, but he does. He's scared, and pain does things to behavior, and transition does things to behavior, but underneath all of it, he knows who he belongs to. Weston was looking at Rex. The late October light had come out briefly between clouds, and it caught the silver in the dog's coat and the lines around Weston's eyes that had nothing to do with age. I didn't know what to do, he said. It was a quiet admission, without the armor that had been around everything else he'd said today. I know how to handle things in theater. I don't know how to. He gestured vaguely at the yard, the clinic, the apartment 11 weeks ago. Nobody teaches you that part, Sable said. No, that's the whole problem. She handed him the remaining printed materials, exercise schedule, medication instructions, Aldo's contact card. Call Aldo this week, not next week, and if Rex has a bad night, or you do, you can call the clinic. The after-hours line comes to me on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Weston looked at the card in his hand and then at her. Why Tuesdays and Thursdays? Because those are my late shifts, and I'm already up. He held her gaze for a moment. Something unreadable moved through it. You're different, he said. From what? From. He shook his head slightly. I don't know. Most people either treat Rex like he's a weapon or treat him like he's a pet, like they have to pick one. You treated him like he was a person. He is a person, Sable said. A traumatized, brilliant, loyal person who happens to have 4 legs. And so are you. The traumatized, brilliant, loyal part. He stared at her. That was a compliment, she added, just to be clear. I know. He looked like he didn't know what to do with it. He called on a Thursday. Not about Rex, or not only about Rex. Rex had been sleeping better, he said. The anti-inflammatory was helping. He'd done the exercises every morning, and Rex now stood up from the bed and walked to the door without that lurching hitch. He'd made the appointment with Aldo, who was Weston's exact word, decent. And then he paused on the phone and said, I haven't slept more than 3 hours at a stretch since we got back. I didn't tell you that when I was in. I know, Sable said. She was in the break room with a cup of coffee going cold beside her. You didn't have to. Aldo said the same thing you did, about the tuning in, about how Rex can feel what I'm carrying. It's true. It feels backwards, like I should be the one managing things. I'm supposed to be handling it. Says who? A pause. I don't know. Everyone. No one. I don't know. You spent 3 years teaching Rex to read your signals so he could do his job, Sable said. That's not a relationship you can turn off. You're still broadcasting. He's still reading. The only difference is that what you're broadcasting right now is pain, and he doesn't know how to fix it, and that's distressing for him. So the way to help him is to help yourself. Silence on the line. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where someone was absorbing something. Aldo said the same thing, Weston said finally. His voice was different on the phone than it had been in person. Slightly more tired. Slightly more real. Smart man, Sable said. He said you called to ask about his program before you referred anyone. That was a pause. Thank you. For that, don't thank me, she said. Bring Rex back in 3 weeks so I can see how the hip is responding. Another pause. Longer. Can I bring him in too? He said. The exercises. I want to make sure I'm doing them right. Sable looked at her coffee. Outside the break room window, the November sky had gone the color of old pewter. 2 weeks, she said. Tuesday morning. He came in on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks later. Rex's gait had improved measurably. His coat was better. His eyes were clearer. When he walked into the waiting room, the same waiting room where he'd stood rigid and growling 6 weeks ago, he went directly to Sable and pressed his nose against her palm in a way that was not demand but greeting. Weston was standing behind him with a slightly different posture than before. Still guarded, but the guard was lower. He'd had a haircut. He was wearing a jacket instead of the cut-off hoodie. He looked like someone who had slept recently for more than 3 hours. "He's eating better," Weston said. "I can see that." Sable ran her hands along Rex's sides, checking weight, feeling the muscles. "The hip? He got up and jumped onto the couch yesterday. I didn't even have to help him. That's significant, no." She looked up. Weston was watching his dog with an expression that was still private, still contained, but something in it had released. A cord that had been held too long finally let go. "He chose you, you know," Weston said. "I know, I've had him for 3 years. He's chosen me once." He paused. "In Kandahar after the incident, when everything was," he stopped, started again. "He came and found me, in the dark, and he just stayed there." His voice had gone very level in the way that meant something complicated was happening underneath it. "I didn't know he could do that again, with someone else." Sable set her stethoscope down on the table. "He didn't choose me instead of you," she said. "He chose me for you. There's a difference." Weston looked at her. "He was trying to show you it was okay to let someone help," she said. "That's what he was doing that first morning. He was demonstrating something." For a long moment, Weston didn't say anything. Rex had wandered back to his side and was leaning against his leg the way Rex apparently leaned when he was trying to steady something. "Aldo says that too," Weston said quietly. "That they communicate in ways we keep interpreting wrong." "We do," Sable agreed. "He also said," Weston stopped. His jaw tightened and released. "He said I should stop apologizing to Rex for things I can't control. That he's not keeping score. That's true. I'm not sure I believe it yet. You'll get there." He nodded. Just once, but it was a real nod, not polite, not dismissive, the kind that meant something had landed. The chart she kept for Rex became, over the following months, one of the most closely annotated in her files. Not because the case was medically complex. The hip dysplasia stabilized, the calcified areas caused no further trouble, the behavioral work with Aldo showed steady, if nonlinear progress, but because Sable had a habit of noting more than just vitals. She noted what changed. What the animal's posture was when they arrived versus when they left. What the owner's voice sounded like when they talked about their dog versus when they talked about themselves. Rex's file eventually included a note that just said, "Both improved. Handler sleeping. Dog choosing couch over floor." 6 months after the first visit, Weston showed up without an appointment. He wasn't carrying anything, not a leash, not a carrier. He stood at the front desk with his hands in his jacket pockets and asked if Sable had a few minutes. She came out from the back and found him standing in the hallway outside room 2. Rex was at his side, and Rex's tail was moving in the easy, relaxed way it had taken months to rebuild. "I'm starting with Aldo's team," Weston said. "They have a handler position opening up in the program, working with other dogs transitioning out of service, teaching the exercises." He looked at the hallway floor briefly. "Aldo recommended me." She stopped. "That's wonderful." I told him I wasn't sure I was qualified. What did he say? He said anyone who could get Rex where Rex is now could handle the job. Weston's mouth curved slightly. "I told him Rex had help." Sable looked at him. "I told him about you," he said, "what you said that first day, about Rex not pulling away, about both of us just being tired." She remembered saying it. She hadn't known if it had landed anywhere. "He said it sounded like you knew what you were talking about," Weston said. I said yeah. He was quiet for a moment. I said yeah, she does. Rex leaned against Weston's leg. Outside, through the clinic's side window, November had turned to April without anyone asking permission, the way months did, and the trees along the parking lot had gone from bare to almost green in the particular slow rush of Virginia spring. "Thank you," Weston said, "for not giving up on him. Thank you for bringing him in," Sable said. "That wasn't nothing." "No," he said. "It wasn't." He looked at her for another moment, something unfinished in it, something that would probably keep being unfinished for a while longer, because some things needed time and some things needed the right sequence of events before they could be said plainly. Rex made a low sound, not a growl, something else entirely. "Okay," Weston said, looking down at the dog. "I know." He looked up at Sable one more time. "We'll see you," he said. "See you," she said. And she watched them walk out through the clinic's front door into the April morning, the man and the dog both moving easier than they had, and stood there for a moment in the quiet hallway with her hand resting on the doorframe of room 2, feeling something settle into place that had no clinical name, but that she recognized, The way you recognized a thing you'd been hoping for without letting yourself know you were hoping for it. Outside, the light was coming through the parking lot trees in long, pale shafts, and Weston held the door open for Rex. And Rex walked through it, and the door swung closed behind them both.